The night I stood in front of 500 wolves and called their alpha a coward to his face, I wasn't shaking. I was done. But let me go back to the beginning, because this story doesn't start with me being brave. It starts with me being invisible. My name is Elena Voss. I'm 24 years old. I'm an Omega in the Ironwood Pack, and for most of my life, that meant one thing: I didn't matter. Ironwood sits in the mountains outside of Bend, Oregon. Beautiful place. Dense evergreen forests, cold river running through the center of town, the kind of quiet that makes outsiders think it's peaceful. For pack members, it's just home. For an Omega with no family rank and no powerful bloodlines, a daily reminder of where you stand. I worked in the pack archives, not the flashy council building downtown. The actual archives, a basement, under the old library that smelled like dust and old pine. I cataloged records, filed land documents, kept the history of the pack that most wolves never cared about. I liked it, actually. The silence, the order. Nobody bothered me down there. Until the night everything changed. It was the harvest gathering. We have it every year at the end of October. The whole pack, 500 wolves give or take, gathered in the clearing at the edge of Ironwood Forest. Bonfires, food, a lot of politics dressed up as celebration. I didn't want to go. My best friend Dara dragged me. She's a beta, sharp-tongued, short, absolutely relentless when she decides something is good for you. She shoved a dress at me, told me I looked like I'd been living under a rock, and physically pushed me out the door. So I went. I was standing near the food tables, holding a cup of something warm, watching the fire, when I felt it. If you've never felt a mate bond snap into place, I don't know how to describe it. It's not gentle. It's not a sweet flutter. It's like getting hit by a truck made of electricity, like your entire body suddenly reorganizes itself around a fixed point. I went completely still. I turned my head slowly, the way you do when you already know something is going to destroy your whole world. Caden Blackthorn was standing 40 feet away. He was the alpha of Ironwood, had been for 2 years since his father stepped down. Caden was 27, 6'3", dark hair, jaw that could cut glass, and a reputation for being cold, efficient, and completely unbothered by anything that wasn't pack business. He was talking to Marcus Hale, his beta. They were laughing at something. And then he looked at me. His whole body went rigid. I watched the laughter die on his face. I watched his nostrils flare. I watched him recognize exactly what was happening in real time, the same way I was recognizing it. And then something happened that I didn't expect. He looked away. Not a slow look, not confusion, a deliberate hard look away, like he'd made a decision in under 2 seconds. He turned his back to me and kept talking to Marcus. I stood there holding my cup for a long time. Dara found me 20 minutes later. She said I looked like a ghost. I told her I was fine. I went home early, sat on my bathroom floor, and cried until I couldn't anymore. I told myself it was a fluke. I told myself maybe I'd imagined it. The bond doesn't always go both ways immediately. Sometimes it's one-sided at first. Maybe he hadn't felt it. But I knew that was a lie. I'd seen his face. The next 3 weeks were a specific kind of quiet torture. Pack life means you see everyone eventually. Ironwood's not that big. I saw Caden twice at pack meetings I was required to attend for archive documentation. Both times, he looked through me like I was furniture. Not rude, not hostile, just absent, like I wasn't a variable in any equation he was running. I told myself fine, I could do that. I was good at being invisible. Then he showed up at the archives. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Quiet. I was alone. The single overhead light was on, and I was deep in a box of land records from the 1980s when I heard the door at the top of the stairs open. I looked up. Caden came down the stairs, dressed plainly, dark jeans, a gray Henley, no pack insignia. He looked like he'd tried to look normal and hadn't quite pulled it off because he was still Caden Blackthorn, and normal wasn't something he did. He stopped at the bottom of the stairs and looked at me. I looked back. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. Elena Voss, he finally said, like he was confirming a fact. Alpha Blackthorn, I said. He came and stood on the other side of my work table. He looked at the box of records like they were deeply interesting for a second, and then he looked at me again. You felt it, he said. I didn't pretend not to know what he meant. Yes. I need you to understand something. I waited. This can't happen, he said. Whatever this is, whatever the bond says, I need you to hear me clearly. I am not going to claim you. It landed like a physical blow. I kept my face neutral. I was good at that. Years of practice. Okay, I said. He blinked, like he'd expected more pushback. Okay? Said your piece, I said. Was there something you needed from the archives? He stared at me for another long moment. Something moved across his face that I didn't have a name for. No, he said. And he left. I sat back down. I picked up the land records. My hands were completely steady. I waited until I heard the door at the top of the stairs click shut before I put my head down on the table. I spent the next month trying to logic my way through it. Alphas can reject mate bonds. It's not common, but it happens. Pack politics, bloodline considerations, strategic alliances, these things exist. I was a nobody Omega with no family rank. Caden was the Alpha. The math wasn't hard. What was hard was the bond itself. Once it activates, it doesn't sit quietly. It's a constant low-level hum in your chest, this pull toward a specific person, this background noise that gets louder every time they're nearby. For Omegas, it's worse. I started sleeping badly. My appetite was off. I was distracted at work. Dara noticed. She's perceptive in the way that small, sharp-tongued people always are. "We're bonded," she said one night over dinner at her place. Not a question. I considered lying. I didn't. Yes, I said. Who? I told her. The silence that followed was long and weighted. Caden Blackthorn, she said carefully. Yes. And he rejected it, told me it can't happen. Dara set her fork down. She had the expression she got when she was calculating something very fast behind her eyes. Did he say why? No. That's strange, she said. I looked at her. Is it? I'm nobody. His fated mate, she said. That's not nothing. Even pragmatic alphas take that seriously. It's law, Elena. You can't just... She stopped. Did he seem like he was struggling with it, or was it cold? I thought about his face when he'd looked at me across the fire, the way his whole body had gone rigid. He was struggling, I said. Before he made the decision to look away, he was struggling. Dara picked her fork back up slowly. Something's blocking him, she said. That's not natural rejection. That's interference. I didn't know what that meant yet. I would. It started with a document. 2 months after the harvest gathering, I was doing routine archive maintenance, cross-referencing pack bloodline records with the new digital database we were slowly building. Boring work. Important work. I pulled my own file. I almost skipped it. I knew my own lineage. But something made me open it anyway. The paper file and the digital file didn't match. On paper, my mother's lineage listed her correctly. Mara Voss, Beta, born in Portland, immigrated to Ironwood Pack at age 22. Clean record, stable bloodline. In the digital system, my mother's origin had been changed. It read Mara Voss, Rogueborn, Pack of Origin, unknown, bloodline classification, unstable. I sat very still for a long time. Rogueborn. In pack law, that carries weight. A wolf born outside any recognized pack with no traceable bloodline is classified as potentially unstable. It's an old classification, mostly obsolete, but it still exists in the legal framework. And in the Ironwood Pack Charter, the old one, written by Caden's grandfather, an alpha's mate must be a verifiable, stable bloodline. If the digital record showed my mother as rogue-born, I would be legally disqualified from being claimed as an alpha's mate. My hands were not steady when I picked up the phone and called Dara. "Someone changed your file," Dara said. She was looking at both versions on my work table, the paper and a printed screenshot of the digital record. Her face was very controlled. "This is deliberate." "I know." "The digital database was built 18 months ago." "Right when?" "Right when Caden became Alpha," I finished. We looked at each other. "Who had access to the database construction?" Dara asked. "3 people," I said. "Me. The head archivist, Claire, who's been in a coma since the car accident last spring and has nothing to do with this. And the Beta's office, which oversaw the digitization project." Dara was very quiet. "Marcus," she said. "Marcus Hale. Caden's Beta, his childhood best friend, the person who had been standing next to Caden at the fire the night I felt the bond. The person Caden trusted more than anyone in the pack." "I can't prove it yet," I said. "The system logs the changes by username, but access was granted through the Beta's office account, which anyone in that office could have used." "But," Dara said. "But Marcus personally signed off on the final database as complete and accurate. His signature is on the verification document." Dara sat back. "He didn't just change the file, he certified it. He buried me before Caden could even look into whether the bond was real." There was a long silence. "How long has Caden known about the altered record?" Dara asked. "I don't know," I said. "Maybe always, maybe never. Maybe someone told him about it, and he took it at face value because he trusted Marcus. Or," Dara said slowly, "maybe Caden found out the bond was real, went to Marcus for advice, and Marcus told him there was a legal problem with the bloodline. A problem Marcus himself created." I closed my eyes. I spent months thinking Caden was cold, calculating, choosing pack politics over a faded bond because I wasn't worth the complication. What if he'd been lied to? What if the man who'd looked at me across that fire, the one who'd gone rigid, who'd shown struggle before he turned away, what if that man had been handed a lie he had no reason to question? It didn't excuse him. He should have talked to me. He should have done his own research. But it changed the shape of the story completely. I spent 3 weeks building the case. I pulled every version of every file I could find. I cross-referenced the server logs, which I had access to as primary archivist. I found the exact timestamp of when my mother's classification had been changed. 14 months ago, 11 days after Caden was formally installed as Alpha. I found 2 other altered files, 2 other Omegas whose records had been quietly adjusted. One was now mated to a pack member who wasn't the Alpha. Her bloodline had been flagged in the digital records. And I found evidence the flag had been placed there after she'd rejected Marcus's advances 3 years prior. Marcus wasn't just protecting Caden from an inconvenient mate bond. Marcus was using the database as a personal weapon. I printed everything. I organized it into a clear, documented packet. I did it the way I'd spent years doing archive work, methodically, precisely, without emotion. Every alteration, every timestamp, every signature, a clean chain that led back to one person. Dara read it over twice. "This would hold up in a pack tribunal," she said. "I know," I said. "You could file with the tribunal directly, bypass Caden entirely, let the council handle it." "I could," I said. She looked at me carefully. "But?" "The claiming ceremony is in 3 weeks," I said. I went very still. "The claiming ceremony happens once a year in Ironwood Pack. It's the formal occasion where unpaired wolves can either publicly claim their fated mates or publicly sever the bond. Once you sever it formally, it's done. The magic doesn't come back. Either Caden claimed me, sat the ceremony, or he severed the bond, and we both moved on. This year, it fell on the first Saturday in December," Dara said carefully. "Going to sever it," I said. I know he is. He spent 14 months acting like I don't exist, and with the falsified record still in the database, he has a legal reason to. He's going to walk into that ceremony and sever the bond publicly, in front of the whole pack, and I'm going to stand there and let it happen, and everyone will watch. Unless, Dara said. Unless I go first. I want to be honest about the 3 weeks before the ceremony. I was terrified. I'm not a confrontational person. I'm the woman who works in a basement, who catalogs records, who spent her whole life being quiet and small, because that was the safest way to move through a pack that didn't consider her important. Standing up in front of 500 wolves and calling the beta a criminal and the alpha a man who'd been deceived wasn't in my nature. But I kept thinking about those 2 other Omegas, the ones whose records Marcus had altered. One of them was named Priya. She was mated now, seemed happy, but I'd seen her file. I'd seen what Marcus had written there. I'd seen the notes he'd left in the internal system, little digital crumbs of a vindictive man covering his tracks. This wasn't just about me. And it wasn't about winning Caden back, either. I want to be clear about that. By the time I was standing in front of that mirror on the morning of the ceremony, I wasn't sure I even wanted Caden anymore. What I wanted was the truth to exist. I wanted it on the record. Whatever happened after that was secondary. The claiming ceremony is held in the pack's Great Hall. It's an old building, stone walls, high ceilings, chandeliers made from antler and iron. The whole pack attends. Everyone dressed formally. The Alpha presides. I arrived with Dara. I was wearing a dark green dress. Dara had picked it. She said I needed to look like I belonged there, and not like I was about to be executed. I told her those might be the same thing. She told me to stop talking. We found seats near the front. I could see the days where Caden would stand. Marcus was already up there, positioned to Caden's left as beta. Marcus saw me when I came in. For just a second, something shifted in his face. A kind of quiet assessment. He knew I worked in the archives. He'd always been pleasant to me. Deliberately pleasant. The way powerful men are pleasant to people they've decided don't matter. I looked at him steadily and then looked away. Caden came in at exactly 7 o'clock. He looked the way alphas are supposed to look at formal ceremonies. Composed, present. The dark formal jacket, the ironwood pack sigil at his collar. He moved through the hall greeting people, shaking hands, doing the ritual social work of his position. He glanced at me once. His jaw tightened slightly, then he moved on. The ceremony started with the formal rituals, the lighting of the pack candles, the blessing from the elder wolves, the pack charter reading. I sat through all of it with my folder of documents on my lap and my heart doing something that wasn't quite a normal heartbeat. Then Caden stepped forward to the center of the dais. "We come now," he said, "to the formal claims and severances." His voice was steady. It always was. He read the names of the wolves who were formally claiming their mates this year. 3 pairs, all of them moving forward together with smiles and tears, and the kind of joy that makes a room feel warm. Then he paused. "Before we come to the severances," he said, and his voice was doing something careful now, something measured. "I want to. Alpha Blackthorn." That was me. I stood up. 500 heads turned. Caden looked at me. His face was very controlled. "Elena Voss," he said, a question wrapped in a statement. "I have a formal filing for the tribunal," I said. My voice was steady. I hadn't known it would be until it was. "Under Ironwood Pack Charter, Section 14, Article 6, the right of any pack member to bring evidence of record falsification to the tribunal before formal legal proceedings occur." Silence. Total, absolute silence. I walked to the front of the hall. I could feel 500 pairs of eyes. I could feel Marcus Hale on my left, and I didn't look at him. I set my folder on the dais railing. Someone altered the bloodline database 14 months ago, I said. My mother's classification was changed from beta, pack-born, to rogue-born, unstable. This change was made to disqualify me legally as a potential alpha's mate. I looked out at the room. The change was certified by Beta Hale. I heard Marcus make a sound, low, controlled. I have the server logs, I said. I have the original paper records. I have the verification document with Beta Hale's signature certifying the falsified database as accurate and complete. And I have 2 other altered files, other pack members whose records were changed after they came into conflict with the Beta's office. I looked at Caden. He was looking at me with an expression I'd never seen on his face before. I'm not here to claim anything, I said. I'm here to make sure the truth exists on the record. Whatever you decide to do with it, that's up to you. I stepped back. The hall erupted. What happened next wasn't quiet or clean. Marcus tried to speak first. He was good under pressure. I'll give him that. Measured voice, reasonable tone, all the hallmarks of a man who'd been preparing for the possibility of exposure and had a story ready. He said the changes had been made in consultation with the Pack Council during the database construction. He said rogue bloodline classifications were being standardized. He said I was misunderstanding administrative records. Caden cut him off. Marcus, just the name, one word, but the way he said it made the whole room go quiet again. I watched Caden pick up my folder from the railing. He didn't flip through it quickly. He looked at the first page, the timestamp page, the one that showed the exact moment my mother's classification was changed. He looked at it for a long time. Then he looked at Marcus. The database was finalized 11 days after my installation, Caden said. The same week you advised me that the Voss bloodline might present a legal issue with the claiming. Marcus didn't answer. You told me her file had been reviewed, Caden said. You told me the classification was pre-existing. Silence. That was a lie, Caden said. It wasn't a question. I watched something happen to Marcus Hale in that moment. The composure cracked, not all at once, but in pieces. He looked at Caden with something raw and complicated, and for a second I think I understood something I hadn't let myself think about before. This wasn't purely political sabotage. This was personal. Marcus had been next to Caden his whole life, had built his entire identity around that proximity, and then a fated bond had appeared that threatened to reorganize the most important relationship in his world. It didn't make what he did right. It made it sadder and worse. Sir, Marcus said, and even now, even caught, the word came out with something that might have been genuine grief. I was protecting the pack. From what? Caden said. From me choosing my own mate? Marcus didn't have an answer for that. There was a tribunal. Not that night. The full formal tribunal happened 10 days later. But the evidence was solid and clean, and Marcus Hale had no defense against documented server logs and his own signature on a falsified certification. He resigned as Beta before the tribunal concluded. I heard he left Ironwood afterward. I didn't ask where. The 2 other Omegas whose files had been altered were notified. Priya came to see me at the archives 2 days after the ceremony. She stood in my basement and looked at her original file and her altered file side by side and said nothing for a very long time. Then she said, "Thank you," and left. I hoped it gave her something, even if I wasn't sure what. Through all of that, Caden and I didn't speak. He was busy. I understood that. A Beta resignation in the middle of a pack tribunal is a significant crisis. There were appointments to make, processes to manage, the pack's trust to stabilize. I went back to work. I cataloged records. I filed documents. I fixed the altered files, all 3 of them, and submitted a formal correction to the database with full documentation of the original falsification. Then I wrote a new protocol for database access that required dual authorization for any bloodline classification change. I was good at this, fixing things quietly, making sure the records were right. It was 2 weeks after the ceremony when I heard footsteps on the archive stairs. I knew whose they were before he reached the bottom. Caden stood at the foot of the stairs again, same as before, different season, same man. This time he looked different. There were shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there in October. He was wearing a dark blue sweater, no pack insignia, and he was looking at me like he was trying to read something he kept losing the place in. He said, "Just my name this time, no last name." "Alpha," I said. "Caden," he said, "please." I set down what I was working on and looked at him. He crossed the room slowly, stopped on the opposite side of my work table. Then, like he'd made a decision, he came around the table and leaned against it beside me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of him. "I owe you an apology," he said, "not just for the last 2 weeks, for the last 14 months. "Marcus lied to you," I said. "Marcus lied to me," he said, "and I should have questioned it. I should have gone to you directly. I should have." He stopped. "I felt the bond at the harvest gathering. You know that." "I know." "I went to Marcus the next morning," he said. "I told him." He seemed supportive at first. Said he'd look into the pack legal requirements. 2 days later, he came back and said there was a bloodline issue in your file. Said he'd flagged it when the database was built. Said it had come up before. I never went and looked myself. A pause. I trusted him. "You'd trusted him your whole life," I said. "That's not an excuse." "No," I agreed, "it's not, but it's a reason." He was quiet for a moment. "I also," he said carefully, "used suppressants for 6 months." I looked at him. After I decided I was going to honor the legal finding, he said, the bond was making it hard to function. I told myself it was the rational choice. He looked at his hands. I stopped taking them 2 weeks before the ceremony. I was going to sever the bond formally. I thought I could walk in there and it would be clinical. Clean. I thought about him standing at that dais. I thought about what he'd been about to say right before I stood up. "Were you going to sever it?" I asked. He looked at me directly. "I don't know," he said. "I'd told myself yes for weeks. And then I walked into that hall and I saw you, and it had been 2 weeks without suppressants. And," he stopped, "you stood up before I had to find out." I sat with that for a moment. The bond was humming between us. Without suppressants, it was loud and clear, the clearest it had ever been. I could feel it pulling toward him from the center of my chest. "I didn't do what I did to force your hand," I said. "I meant what I said. I wasn't there to claim anything." "I know," he said. "That's..." He exhaled. "That's part of what I need to apologize for. You protected yourself and 2 other pack members and set the record straight, and you did it without asking anything of me. And I've spent 2 weeks trying to figure out why that's the thing that finally..." He stopped again. He wasn't a man who ran out of words easily. It seemed to be a specific problem with me. "Finally what?" I said. He turned to look at me. Close now, close enough that I could see the exact shade of his eyes, which were darker than I'd realized. A deep gray-green I'd never been near enough to properly see. "Made me understand what I'd given up," he said. I held his gaze. "I'm not going to ask you to claim me," I said. "I'm not going to make this easy by pretending the last 14 months didn't happen. I'm not asking you to." "Angry," I said. "I've been trying not to be, but I am. You made a decision about my life without talking to me. Even if Marcus lied, you chose not to question it because questioning it would have been inconvenient." "Yes," he said, "he didn't hedge it. That's true." "And I spent 14 months thinking I wasn't good enough," I said. "That you'd looked at me and decided I wasn't worth the complication. That was the story I told myself every single day. And it wasn't even the real story." "I know," he said. "Elena. Not done." He closed his mouth. "The bond doesn't fix that," I said. "The bond is just a fact of nature. It doesn't mean you deserve my trust. It doesn't mean I owe you anything." No, he said, it doesn't. I'm going to need time, I said. He nodded once. And I'm going to need you to be honest with me, I said. Not alpha honest, where you only say the things that are politically safe, actually honest. I can do that, he said. I looked at him for a long moment. The basement was very quiet, the single overhead light, the boxes of records stretching back decades on their shelves, all the history of a pack that had existed before either of us and would exist long after. My mother was a beta from Portland, I said. She met my father at a regional gathering when she was 22. He was Ironwood-born, low-ranked. They were happy for 9 years before he died. She raised me alone. She was the most stable, steady person I've ever known. Caden listened. She passed 2 years ago, I said. Heart failure. She never knew what Marcus put in her file. A pause. Glad she didn't, I said. She would have been furious. Something moved across Caden's face. Not pity. Something softer than that. She sounds like where you get it from, he said. Get what? The steadiness, he said. The way you walked up to that dais and your voice didn't shake. I looked away. My voice shook the whole way there in my head, I said. He was quiet for a moment. Mine too, he said quietly, watching you. I looked back at him. The bond hummed. Not promising anything, I said. I know. But you can, I stopped. You can come back, if you want to talk. Not about the bond, just talk. He looked at me like I'd said something significant. Just talk, he said. To start with. He nodded, slow, careful, like a man making a promise he intended to keep. Okay, he said, can I ask one thing? What? Can I see the protocol you wrote? He said, the new dual authorization system for bloodline records. I stared at him. He was looking at the stack of papers on my table, with what appeared to be genuine interest. I felt something loosen in my chest that had been tight for a very long time. That's really what you want to talk about, I said. I also, he said, want to talk about digitizing the pre-1970s land records. Claire mentioned before the accident that there were gaps in the ownership chains in the Northern Territories. I've been meaning to send someone down here for months. He stopped. I kept finding reasons not to come myself. I looked at him. He looked back. Alpha Blackthorn, I said. Caden, he said. Caden, I said, are you asking to help me with archive work as an excuse to spend time in my basement? A pause. Yes, he said, without any visible shame about it. I was quiet for a second. Then I pulled the new protocol document off my table and handed it to him. The pre-1970s records are in the back left corner, I said. There's a folding chair somewhere in the storage closet. And the Wi-Fi password is written on the wall by the circuit breaker. He took the document. He found the chair. Sat down in the back left corner of my archive basement and opened a box of land records from 1963. And the two of us worked in silence for the rest of the afternoon. It was, I realized, the first time I'd felt like myself since October. That was 7 months ago. Things moved slowly, by choice, mostly mine. I won't pretend it was easy. There were conversations that were hard. There were nights I went home angry about things that had already been settled, just needing to feel the anger again until it ran out. Caden was, patient isn't quite the right word. Patient implies passivity. He was present. He showed up in my basement twice a week and worked alongside me, and sometimes we talked and sometimes we didn't, and he answered every hard question honestly, even when the honest answer wasn't flattering to him. I found out things I hadn't known, that he'd been more conflicted during those 14 months than I'd seen, that he'd almost come to find me 3 separate times and stopped himself each time because he believed the legal problem with my bloodline was real. That the night of the harvest gathering, before he turned away, he had stood there for a full 10 seconds deciding. I told him I was still angry about that. He said I was right to be. I told him I needed to see the actual decisions going forward, not just the regret. He heard that. The new beta is a woman named Sorrel, who is sharply competent and has no complicated history with either of us, which feels important. She's already fixed 3 other low-level administrative problems that Marcus's long tenure had allowed to calcify. Ironwood is better for it. Priya came back to see me once more. She told me knowing the truth about her file had changed something she couldn't fully name. Her mate noticed, she said. Things between them were better. I didn't ask for details. It wasn't my story to carry. The claiming ceremony this year is in 3 weeks. Last week, Caden came to the archives on a Tuesday, which is not one of his usual days. He sat down across from me. No land records in hand. He just sat there, looking at me with the particular serious expression I've come to recognize as meaning he's about to say something he's thought about carefully. I'd like to formally claim the bond at the ceremony, he said. If you're willing. I looked at him. That's a big ask, I said. I know. Last year at that ceremony you were going to sever it. Last year I was a worse version of myself, he said. I was quiet for a long time. The bond hummed between us. I spent a year being angry and working through the anger and deciding slowly who I was on the other side of it. I'd spent a year watching a man try to earn something that was never guaranteed. He hadn't rushed it. He hadn't leveraged the bond or the alpha authority or the pack politics. He'd just shown up, twice a week in my basement, with land records and patience and honesty that cost him something every time. Yes, I said. He breathed out, one slow, careful exhale. Okay, he said. Make me regret it, I said. I'm going to try not to, he said. That's not a promise, technically. Better than a promise, I think. Promises are easy. Trying, actually trying, with the full knowledge that you might fail and you're choosing to show up anyway, that's the harder thing. So that's the story. I stood in front of 500 wolves and called their alpha out, and the man behind the alpha turned out to be someone who'd been lied to and made the wrong call and then spent a year trying to be worth the truth I'd handed him. And I was a woman who spent 14 months being invisible and decided, finally, that being seen was worth the cost of standing up. My name is Elena Voss. I work in the archives. And in 3 weeks, at the claiming ceremony, I'm going to walk to the front of a room full of wolves who watched me hold my ground. Voice steady, hands full of proof, and I'm going to be claimed by the alpha who once refused to look at me. Not because the bond says I should. Because I decided I want to. That's the difference. And it's everything.